Welcome to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Brian Edward, and next to me is Antonio Fritz Blandon, who is my co-host today. If you like what we do, please sign up to our Subscribe Star account. Even a few donations definitely keeps the lights on and helps do what we're doing. So we appreciate the guys that have done that and donated. Don't have to, but it's always appreciated. Today we have a special guest who I'm definitely looking forward to talking to. Tim Pool, and there's no E on that. So Tim Pool, like you would jump into a pool of water. He's an American journalist whose unique style of interactive broadcast journalism exists at the intersection of social and mainstream media. I thought that was good. Intersectionality. Okay. As a former producer for Vice Media, he has covered major events around the world in places such as Istanbul, Cairo, and Sao Paulo. Tim's coverage for Vice.com, as well as his groundbreaking live stream coverage of the 2011 Occupy Wall Street protest movement, has been featured by international media outlets including The Guardian, Reuters, The New York Times, NBC, FastCompany, and Al Jazeera English. That's a pretty nice bio. Welcome, Tim.
That's a really, really old bio.
Yeah. Well, hey, they were criticizing me for using Alta Vista as my web browser. So
it still exists.
It might, but it could have been from a dream. But unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember when Alta Vista was actually like a pretty premier server.
Oh, what else was there? Juno, Ask Jeeves.
Yeah, Ask Jeeves.
Juno. What else is there? Man, I remember Alta Vista.
There
was Lycos and Hotbot.
Yeah, remember Yahoo?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
That's a half joke.
Dude,
for some reason, they still exist.
Boards and FidoNet. Like, you'd call up the local thing, and then they would just intersect them all. Like, crazy stuff. Yeah. But so Tim, I really liked some of your like coverage all over. I didn't realize that you were in the Ukraine and in Venezuela, and a lot of these places. Like, so. Why did you get into coverage of those topics? What you call civil unrest? What attracted you there?
It's places where history was being made. You know, when the news breaks and they tell you this area is undergoing some kind of rapid change, I wanted to see it firsthand, right? So I've always been a travel junkie, and when it came to these big breaking stories around the world, travel plus interesting, fun adventure, to witness history in real time. And it just so happens that an effective way to bring value from these trips is journalism. So I wouldn't just go somewhere as like a tourist. I'd go there and be like, I can tell people what I'm witnessing and learning, and it's actually a very important service. So it was fun. It's I like learning about things, and I like witnessing them firsthand because I don't trust a lot of these big media companies. So I'd want to be there to know for sure, and trust myself to tell people like, hey man, this is what I saw. So I did that for a while, but it gets too dangerous eventually. So,
what was the first one? I mean, did that hook you in? Like, what the first time that you would describe?
I've been a protest my whole life, so it's all just an offshoot extension of when I was younger. I was in protests. I was protesting, and then when I got older, it was kind of like my friends would be like, "Hey, you want to go check out this protest?" And then Occupy Wall Street happened, so I was like, "Yeah, I'll check this out." Right? Sounds like something interesting is happening. And that kind of kicked things off. I started live streaming through my phone. This was back with the Galaxy 1, the Galaxy S1, the first iteration. That's what I was using. And then I remember I upgraded just a few months after Occupy started, finally to the Galaxy S2. Wow, now we're on the 10. It's been a long time. But so following Occupy, I got a ton of press. A bunch of companies made me offers. I ignored all of them because I was like a rebel. Nah, get out of here. I'm not going to go work for you. And then for about a year and a half, just did my own thing, traveling around, covering different protests, and then eventually went to work for Vice and tried to, turn it into something legitimate, I shouldn't say legitimate because it's what I was doing but turn into a more formal, expand and grow. And that's just basically what I've kept on doing. Eventually, you get too many followers, it becomes too dangerous to actually go out. I was in Berkeley, 2 years ago, and I was just skateboarding. Like, it wasn't an event. I was skateboarding in Berkeley, and so I had some dudes start threatening me and saying some insane, ridiculous conspiracy theory nonsense about me. And the leader of their gang, I suppose you'd call it, intervened and told them to just to leave me alone. And it's like, it gets to that point where it's like, yeah, okay. And it's not just the crazy conspiracy people haters, but it's also, you know, just like generally crazy people who chase me around shrieking and saying weird things because they know who I am. So at a certain point, I can't really do that anymore. But that's true for, you know, basically everybody. Like Anderson Cooper has like 50 security people surround him as he, and that to me seems like totally pointless. Like if you're going to go down and you're like a high profile journalist, you're going to cause a bigger scene than, you know, actually like than the scene is, right? If Anderson wants to go cover a story and he shows up, now you got this big CNN crew, and now they're actually, you know, basically shoving out what the story was and putting themselves in the center. And that's for me why I'm like, yeah, I you know, there's some things I can do internationally, but it's gotten too crazy over the past few years. I've gained way more followers. You know, when I was traveling to foreign countries like Ukraine and Venezuela, I had like 30,000 Twitter followers. Now I've got 320. You know, I've got almost 1 million YouTube subscribers across all my 3 different channels. At this point, it's like other people are going to have to go. So now, you know, what I'm doing is as we expand, I'm doing more kind of behind the desk, more opinion stuff. But I'm using the revenue from this to fund actual journalism, you know, people who are actually going on the ground. And we're also doing some original reporting through, you know, like typical internet means covering tech and science and stuff. So, you know, it's all growing.
You know, one of the things that you'd mentioned that I was going to bring up as well is the safety issue. You're now building a team to be able to do some of this, what it seems you wish you can go back to doing. Outside of doing more domestic work, we can, you know, talk about that with you know, your van a little bit later and see where it is you'd like to go there, especially with Subverse, which is another big topic that I want to get into at some point. Where do you see yourself being able to go internationally? I mean, you know, there's always news. You know, I'm from Nicaragua. There's a lot happening in Nicaragua. Mexico, right down, you know, down the border, is going through an immigration caravan. They're going through their own civil war. You've worked with Vice. I mean, North Korea, Yemen, Syria. Where do you see yourself going that you won't have to carry a team of 50 security guards?
Well, probably, you know, the UK and most US places, I will need, I'll probably never have a security guard. Never. So I just have to recognize for Canada, the US, the UK, maybe Australia and New Zealand, like, you know, Commonwealth, English speaking countries, I'll probably have to be aware that people there might start recognizing me. Ultimately, I'm not super worried. You know, whatever, man. If like 50 Antifa come and start like bashing me in the face with crowbars, it's like, I don't know, whatever, I guess. You know, I'm not going to let that deter me. But I'd be more, I'm less interested in that. You know, I would be more interested in going to somewhere like Egypt again, or, you know, I've been trying to go to Iran for a while, but that's just way too difficult. It's actually somewhat easier when you're higher profile, because then they kind of have like their security forces might like know who you are. And then admittedly, like it's risky, you know, they could lock you up and use you as leverage, but I think that's less likely. You know, we've had some very high profile people go to Iran. And then you have minders, government minders that, you know, kind of watch you. So you have to do your thing. And then once you leave the country, you can be like, here's what happened, and I can never go back. But
right,
you know,
in Iraq, like, you know, he had the Iraqi police around him while he was doing it. So there's plenty of things you can't report on.
Yeah, exactly.
You're probably safer.
Yeah, maybe Antarctica. That's great. Penguins aren't going to care about me, you know, so I can go down there. I don't know. I'm pretty safe going to South America. You know, countries that don't speak English. I'm not super worried. I'm looking at Argentina. I have a visa for Brazil. I've been there several times. So stories in a lot of these countries. Europe, potentially. You know, there's a lot of countries in Europe, Eastern Europe, that are, you know, like Ukraine again. Mm-hmm. So I'm not super concerned, but there's definitely, when it comes to, you know, like Western politics, which includes the Commonwealth countries as well as the US, it's more of a risk because I'm an active combatant essentially in terms of the culture war.
Yeah.
So that puts a bigger, you know, target on my back. If I were to go to Egypt, people wouldn't, you know, think twice.
It's funny how that you mentioned Antarctica and penguins, because I think in one of your videos you mentioned that the penguin for a while was kind of a symbol of absurdity, and that the media wasn't covering some of these big protests, and in one point we're running a documentary on penguins. And as a result, that the penguin with a raised fist and a gas mask was kind of be used as like a derisive symbol. Like, when do you feel like this change was that the moment that kind of this citizen journalism really came into being? And do you think that this will continue this way?
The penguin thing was in Istanbul. It was in Turkey. CNN's Turkish arm, instead of covering the Gezi Park protests, aired a documentary on penguins. So people started taking the symbol of the penguin. That's just one instance. I mean, it's really funny how, especially with the Arab Spring, we had a lot of talk of how social media and technology was empowering people to tell the truth and like expand journalism. There's a lot of excitement that, wow, could you imagine what the future is going to be like if we have access to this flow of information? And now what happened? Well, when you look at it with a wholesome point of view, you're thinking about, we have journalists do a good job. Imagine if we give them this power. What really happens is you open the door and the sociopaths manipulate the system. They eventually, imagine it like this. Twitter was, imagine a piece of sidewalk with a bunch of cracks in it, and you pour water into it. And that's what happens. The sociopaths find that path seeping through the cracks and eventually become the dominant force on social media. And now you've got these people like, one of the things I talked about the other day, Huffington Post wrote a story about a 5-year-old mobile game because you played as an assassin, and one of the missions involved killing a journalist. So they wrote this story and called the company, which is an implied threat. It is, whether look, they called the company and said, why did you make it a level where you could kill a journalist? So what did the company do? They pulled the level out of the game. These journalists use the getting a comment idea as a way to sort of threaten these companies. We're going to give you bad PR unless you do what we say.
In the same way that like Michael Avenatti threatened Nike, like, I'm going to take 10 million off your bottom line, except for maybe not quite that explicit.
So you look at what CNN does, and they're like, we're just reporting the facts. But what did CNN do? CNN reaches out to Facebook and tells them about a left-wing anti-war media outlet called Antifa Media. And they said this media organization is partially funded by Ruptly, which is funded by Russia. Why are they on your platform? It is not against the rules to receive funding from a Russian entity. Facebook suspended Antifa Media. CNN waited until Facebook took action to report the story, and then the story was Facebook suspends Russian-funded media or something like this. That's not journalism. That's targeting a company that's threatening Facebook with, we're going to give you bad PR on the Russia front unless you do what we say. And then Facebook suspends a media company who broke no rules, did nothing wrong, is not hate speech. It's just anti-war content. And that's what CNN does. They're activists, they're bullies, they're narcissists, they're sociopaths. That is not journalism.
So with that idea, that seems like part of the insanity that you talk about, part of the insanity that will eventually make you crazy, which is why you went off into the woods to kind of recollect yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's so important. I'm a very metropolitan person, but I need to get away. And when I get away, I'm out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the jungle, and it's just me time to kind of recollect myself.
Well,
but,
I mean, that video was actually in the New York Metro. I was that's just north of New York.
Hilarious.
It wasn't, super far away or anything. We were there on a business trip, and it was just, look, New York's a beautiful place. It was Connecticut. It's a New York area, right? And so then we did the video about Subverse and stuff. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like I drove off into 1,000 miles into the middle of nowhere. I was like, we drove up to New York City and went to the trees about 40 minutes north.
Well, I would say even Central Park has some places where you can kind of recollect yourself with just birds chirping and but the point is, how do you avoid this insanity? You want to avoid the insanity, as you mentioned, but I feel the work you're doing is extremely important. And if we avoid the insanity, does that just mean that we've succumbed to, this is just the way the world's going to be? I don't have time to keep following this insanity. I'm going to go do this more thing about this old lady who the story happened to.
I think I've had varying opinions on what we're going to see in the future, and right now I feel like we're probably going to see the rise of fascism, and it's not because Trump. It's not. It's because we've seen the insanity. We've seen the street battles. We've seen people lose their jobs. It was just reported that a high school in Chicago had to pay $53,000 because someone made the okay hand gesture in a picture and they panicked. You get a guy banned from Wrigley Field for playing the circle game. This insanity is escalating. And there was a point where I said, I think we're going to see civil conflict in some way. It's not the same as it's going to be in the past because technology is very, very different. In fact, in the information war we're going through now with people trying to get other people banned that might be the extent to which we see the conflict. Because, one thing I explain to people, it used to be if you wanted a country's resources, you had to take it from their cold, dead hands. But now we can sort of mind control you by inundating you with different press and different media narratives. And so there's really a battle over persuading you to do the right thing. If I can convince you to lay down your guns, I don't need to shoot you, right? And that's why, I think the information war may be the thing. But the reason I think fascism might actually pop up is partly due to the regressive left. When the left cannot mount a defense against the right. So actually, let me step back. The left and the right kind of play tug of war. The left wants to pull the right towards progress and into a new world and progressivism, and the conservatives restrain them from going crazy. The left has gone completely crazy, and I think part of it has to do with the far left ideology that dominated Silicon Valley. They now one faction controls the flow of information outright, and they'll censor certain conservative voices and they'll suppress conservative news. It's a fact. Gizmodo reported this. It's, but you'll see these people claim it's not true, probably because they want to defend their attack vector. So then what ends up happening is the left has gone so insane, moderate people are becoming conservative. People I know my whole life who are Bernie Sanders supporting, pro-choice liberals are now saying, screw it. And they vote for Trump. Somebody, I can't remember who on Twitter, just today said, you've got Trumpism and you've got the regressive left. And what the left doesn't realize is that people are going to say, screw it, I'll take Trump. And then so the reason why I think we'll end up seeing fascism is that I think we're seeing a mounting attack on Roe v. Wade, where all of these states are trying to pass this, abortion laws that fly in the face of Roe v. Wade on purpose.
Yes.
So they can get the law challenged and put in front of the Supreme Court. We have a very conservative Supreme Court, may overturn Roe v. Wade. Now think about this. They overturn Roe v. Wade. Trump gets reelected in 2020. 2024 comes around and the left is so fragmented and fractured, they can't beat the Republicans again. With the escalation of violence, tension, and absolute absurdity and insanity from the left, I think they're going to go so just absolutely insane that it's going to force the state into a massive police state, something we could call fascism. So it's not like, if right now the left just started behaving themselves, stopped attacking people for making okay hand gestures, and actually brought, plausible ideas to the table. Like Trump says, hey, we've got an immigration crisis. What does Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer say? It's immoral to build a wall. Well, you didn't offer me a solution. So quite literally, the only person offering up any kind of solution is Trump. What they're saying is just about morality, which means nothing. So there's no mounting defense against Trump, which is going to result in, Trump's going to keep winning. Roe v. Wade gets overturned. The left goes crazy, smashes buildings, starts fires, goes rioting like nuts. And this is going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until we've already got, redneck revolt marching around with guns. You've got the 3%ers and the Oath Keepers marching around with guns. And as much as you might say these are people who know how to handle themselves and know how to handle guns, you get a bunch of angry people rioting, throw in some, AR-15s, and eventually things spill over. What happens? The state steps up their response. Police come out in force, start restricting speech, legitimately, even in the face of the Constitution. I'm not saying I think that's absolutely going to happen, but for a while I thought we'd have like a civil conflict where like people in the streets would fight periodically and it would escalate. But I think we're going to see a state response that's very, very strong. And I think some people on the left actually want that to happen. They want to shock the system with a police state, so they want to encourage that to happen. But I'll step way back and just say Roe v. Wade is it's seriously going to be threatened, right? And if it does, it's going to be riots in every street, every city across the country, and that's going to result in something.
But the analysis that I've been to play maybe devil's advocate a little bit on the Roe versus Wade thing, like if that gets overturned, there's another statute, and I can't remember that it was Planned Parenthood versus something that is a later case that instead of creating a trimester portion of the abortions being legal or illegal, they basically created an undue burden standard. And they could either widen or restrict that undue burden standard. You could get rid of Roe and have this second case be widened or pushed. I mean, even Ben Shapiro thinks that that's what's going to happen. They're just going to move that, and they're probably that he doesn't think Kavanaugh's conservative enough to restrict it much more, that it doesn't change. And I guess, so maybe we could speak to that, but also, what about like if you were taking like the Watts riots, or things like Kent State in the 70s, or even like in the 90s with the Rodney King riots, were just absolute bedlam. I mean, we haven't seen it as much as like Portland's going crazy right now. Nothing is approaching that level. So, is this just one of those worrisome things that doesn't generate into fascism?
I mean, LA was very localized, right? I can't speak for a lot of the other circumstances. The LA riots happened in LA. We're seeing something across the cultural fabric of the entire West. It's not just the US. It's in the UK. The UK's got it worse. Australia just passed a censorship bill. The UK did, or they're about to at least. The EU is doing the Christchurch calls. They want massive speech controls. Well, you can't do that in the US. We have a constitution. We have the First Amendment. So we're going the other direction. But this is way bigger than just some racial tensions in Los Angeles. This is international. So, when you look at the UK, people getting arrested for telling jokes, people get, there's a story right now that Facebook maintains a hate list. They're saying if you don't condemn these people, you could be banned. You can only talk about Alex Jones if you're criticizing him. So maybe it won't be, maybe it won't be people running around the street with guns and blowing things up, because we're in a new era with technology. This could be the conflict. The culture war could be it. But I definitely think we're headed for a nightmarish dystopia. You can call it technocratic fascism. Facebook maintains a hate agent list. And there's a story from Breitbart, whether you want to trust Breitbart or not, I think the story is probably credible. They have screenshots. They're saying that Sargon of Akkad has listed Carl Benjamin as a hate agent because he spoke neutrally about a Proud Boy.
Oh, God.
They've got him on a list ready to be censored or banned for being neutral on the Proud Boys. That's Facebook saying you're only allowed to have the opinions we want you to have, otherwise we'll remove you from the platform. And that's quite literally what they've done. Like Paul Joseph Watson getting banned from Instagram, it's just it's just selfies. That's insane. That's monopolistic. And then when it comes to, you've got the conservatives saying we don't want regulation, and you've got the liberals saying, it's a private business who can do what they want. So there's literally no one fighting back against these massive monopolistic multinational billion-dollar corporations that are exerting social control through speech policing. And it's people like us sitting here, and it's not a tiny group, right? There's a lot of people who are concerned about this, but it's not the mainstream left or the mainstream right. And so we're gonna sit back and watch them take over. And welcome to the future. You can't speak, you can't spend money. You're gonna get banned by MasterCard. You're gonna get banned by Chase Bank, and then you can go live in the woods. Maybe that'll.
It's interesting that I guess my weird dystopia goes this way, and you may be right. I have no idea, but I see the same sort of the censorship in this push to cull the opinions into what's acceptable, eventually culminating in, imagine if, okay, you got Alex Jones, you got all these people. I don't think Paul Joseph Watson should have been banned, and others. But what if they went after Fox News? Right now, this is a large.
They are going after Fox News.
Right. Then they are. But let's say they succeeded in getting advertisers to drop, and Fox News comes tumbling down. Now that would be that would be extraordinary, far more than Alex Jones and this and that.
Fox's primetime lineup has lost a substantial portion of their advertisers. Tucker lost, I think, 22. Janine Pirro lost like 30 or 40%. So yeah, they're doing this.
Okay, but if it completely falls, what you could have is legislators then say break up the monopoly of just in the same way they broke up AT&T or Microsoft. You break up social media, and then things polarize. So now you have right-wing social media, so to speak, left-wing, right-wing, and then there's right-wing Kmart, left-wing Kmart, and everything gets pushed around. That's where it would go.
You can't break up Twitter. What Twitter can't be broken up. It's Twitter is one thing. Facebook can be broken up in the sense that they have to release WhatsApp and Instagram. That's probably an important thing, but Facebook can't be broken up. Facebook is just a place where people sign up, and there's no way to segment what Facebook is.
But you could say, okay, we'll split to two companies. You all have the same technology. You give them the apps, and then now you're competitors, and you go to town. Both companies would go far left. They'd both be the same thing.
Yeah,
and they'd ban conservatives.
Mentioning that about the far left, Is our culture just going from a point of political correctness gone wild? I mean, is social media, for instance, moving towards social justice due to the fact that it just wants to be a form, or it's just a form of corporate virtue signaling? Is this what they're doing?
Well, I don't know. What I can say is, in my opinion, I think what we're seeing is it's a Mexican standoff. Everybody's pointing a gun at everybody else. No one actually cares about principle or political correctness or social justice. That is not the point. The point is social media has created a digital riot. It's a massive mob of angry people who are bouncing around aimlessly. I call it a chaotic, destructive force. That's all it really is. There's no ideology. There's no principle. You can argue that it's the SJWs, but within the SJWs, if you want to use that phrase, they disagree with each other. They're not the same group. You've got you've got gender critical feminists, you've got radical feminists, you've got sex negative feminists, you've got sex negative and sex positive feminists believing, like standing side by side and then turning on each other and screaming at each other for holding the wrong view. It's just chaos. And what happens is, there was a funny thing I saw Paul just Watson tweeted. Airbnb said, hey, this new Spice Bus is now available for booking. And someone said it was white supremacy and stop. And Airbnb is like, oh, we don't condone that. No, by no means. Please message us and let us know. And it's like when a Chicago high school has to pay 50 grand to redo their yearbook because someone made the okay hand gesture, it's not social justice. It's just everyone is in a Mexican standoff and they're terrified the mob will turn on them. So you've seen these really funny circumstances where there was this one nonprofit that used the word Womxn, WOMXN. They said that's an inclusive word for women of color and trans women. Feminists and the social justice community got outraged. Trans women are women. They don't need a special word.
Oh, didn't see that one.
Hold on.
Oh,
wait, it gets better.
Exclusive.
So then a black feminist university organization said, no, they do need a special word and it's offensive to not use it. So we're now put in a position where if you use women with an X, Womxn, and you're offensive. If you don't use it with an X, you're offensive. Quite literally, there are no rules. There are no principles. It's just random groups getting outraged and claiming to be in front of the mob. It's just a Mexican standoff. So I think when you look at like the Womxn scenario, or you look at the untenable position of trans women competing against biological females, regular people are going to snap. You can't put someone in this position where they're being pulled from left and right with no way, to exist in society. Everything's going to come tumbling down. I don't know necessarily what that means, but things are falling apart. People are trying to figure out how to be in the mainstream. Everyone wants to be socially accepted, but there's no way to do that anymore.
Yeah, social cohesion is falling apart, and that does worry me. It's weird that, okay, I don't like the Alabama law. I do believe that that's way too restrictive. It's essentially an abortion ban. I even think that Georgia and Ohio are essentially abortion bans. But what's weird is now I think Colorado said that its government officials weren't allowed to fly and do business in Alabama. Like, wow. I mean, okay, if you don't like Alabama, then get out of Alabama. Like, don't. But for
why are California celebrities trying to change Alabama's laws? Why were California celebrities flying to Georgia to try and campaign for a specific politician? You do not live there. That is not your representative. Why are Hollywood celebrities donating to Texas congressional politicians or New York? Why are we having people who live outside these jurisdictions trying to influence the elections of these places? That's going to lead to serious trouble.
Again, is it just virtue signaling? I mean, I feel like this is just, again, virtue signaling and political correctness just gone haywire in our society. What's the answer? Tim, you talk about this the entire day. First thing I do when I wake up in the morning, I'll be honest, Tim, I'm a big fan. I listen to your work, and I'm trying to figure out.
His wife forgets to brush his teeth.
I'm trying to figure out, Tim, how do you not become my echo chamber? Who do you recommend for me to listen to that's rational in an opposing opinion? Do you have somebody you can recommend?
Yeah, I always recommend David Pakman and ContraPoints. I think they do a great job. I disagree with them on a lot of issues, but I think it's important not to just, for me, I purposefully want people I disagree with to like talk to me. And I think Contra does a really good job of breaking down arguments. I think a lot of, Contra's arguments are wrong, but that's fine. That's the point. I want to hear this. And there's, David, we had a really great conversation recently. And he brought up a really good point that strengthened my argument and view on what's happening with social media. So that was extremely beneficial to have a conversation with someone who disagreed with me. David, so my initial stance was that Twitter is essentially exempt from civil rights law because they could ban anyone for any reason. David said they're not exempt. They're not banning people for, say, being gay or Muslim. They're banning you for the ideas you speak. And that's a really good distinction because you could be straight and advocate for homosexuality, in which case you're not being banned because you're gay, because you're not gay. But that brings us to an even more dangerous position in which I don't know how you protect ideas legally, but then like imagine if the civil rights era was happening with social media, and you had a civil rights leader go on Twitter and say, "I believe segregation should be ended." So Twitter said, "You're banned." So David brought up a really good point, and I think we're looking at a new civic that needs to be addressed. Are people allowed to express specific ideas on social media platforms, on these private companies? And this is something we have never dealt with before. So anyway, I digress. Yeah, I think, and Kyle Kalinske is really, really great too. Kyle Kalinske is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that may because now if you do that, the game is sort of maybe unwinnable. And Miles Kinslow says, "Hey guys, great interview, big fan, Tim. Always rooting for you to win." And I wonder, is that, speaking of winning, right? The activists that are doing this, like they wanted to win a governorship in Georgia, even if though it wasn't theirs. They want to repeal a law somewhere, even if it isn't theirs. That they want to win. Again, it's like each inch is closer to the finish line. If you do have like an internet bill of civil rights, so to speak, and now these are protected by the government like that, does some of this low activism stop? Because when you see it work, when you see a company apologize, or you see Twitter ban a person, you're like, I had an impact. I'm going to keep doing that. But if these companies had the government Bill of Rights to back up with, maybe some of this stops because it's not a winnable game.
Well, look at it this way. Right now, you've got these activists pretending to be journalists complaining, why won't Facebook ban these people? Tommy Robinson has a campaign account and YouTube's refused to ban it. Twitter banned the campaign accounts for Tommy and Sargon. And I think that's an insane violation of public norms to take on. It's not even run by them. It's a campaign notification. And these are people running for political office. But here's the thing. These activists who pretend to be journalists, say it like BuzzFeed, will only ever call Twitter and say, why won't you ban this account? Why won't you ban this account? And they specifically get their political opponents banned. Imagine if the regulation stepped in, a guarantee to free expression on speech platforms, even if they're private or of a certain size. Twitter can then say, sorry, we can't ban them. It's illegal. That would actually diffuse a lot of these activists' attempts, because the companies could just be like, whoop, we're regulated. We can't do that. Sorry.
That's what I think, because I really think, as much as I do think Jack Dorsey's progressive and such, I got to believe that that Twitter and Facebook are worth a lot of money, especially Facebook, that they're more concerned about the dollars than they are the ideology.
Absolutely. That's why they banned Alex Jones, but not Ancient Aliens. They're not concerned about fake news. They're concerned about bad press. That's why they threw Louis Farrakhan into the list of the far right people who got banned, and everyone started calling Farrakhan far right, because they just put out a list like, we're going to ban the far right. Oh, but we better ban Farrakhan, otherwise we'll get accused of bias. And then all of a sudden, all these news outlets are like far right influencers like Farrakhan, Paul Joseph Watson, etc., because they don't know what they're talking about. I think we've been dominated by two factions of journalists: the activists, who are sociopaths who want fame and power and want to push their will on other people, and the lazy paycheck people who are like, whatever the press release says. And there's very few people who actually do journalism today, which is sad.
Well, you're kind of into hacker culture in tech too. How much of this is bots versus like an actual bad actor in the media that's really like perverting news? How much of this is bots pushing this narrative that could outrage it too?
It's hard to say. Depending on which organizations you talk to, they might say half of all traffic is bots, maybe 60%. But bots are typically easy to spot. It could be sock puppets, right? So they're likely not bots. Bots are typically used to influence advertising and generate revenue. They're probably sock puppet accounts, which is run by an actual human, but typically a sock puppet will be, one person will have 50 accounts, and they'll try and make it seem like more people support something. That's probably what it is. You'll see a very small, tiny fringe group of activists, maybe like 7, but they'll have 300 Twitter accounts, and they'll all tweet to Nestle saying, hey, this is racist. It's 7 people. Nestle thinks it's 300. And then there's this perspective bias that you see on Twitter when you get 99 notifications. That's the max. You click notifications, and every single tweet is saying you're racist. You assume it's everybody. In fact, it's just 7 people saying the same thing through different accounts over and over again. And it's really easy to manipulate society this way because, it's a vulnerability. I hope we grow resilient. One way we can solve this problem is when companies just tell these people to screw off. When they call up and say, did you know so-and-so is a Proud Boy or whatever, be like, I don't care. Bye. Click. But they're scared. They're scared of bad press. Normal people don't care, but they're scared of the bad press, so they bend over backwards. And it could be one person pretending to be 300. And these companies will do whatever they say. It's insane.
Is it simply because the companies are part of just normie culture? They just don't understand that this is how the game is played?
It's simply risk versus reward, right? If you're a plumber, you don't follow the news. You don't know who Tommy Robinson is. You get an offer. This guy Tommy says he needs the toilet, cleaned up. All of a sudden, you get a phone call. Someone sends you a link to a website, it's a news website saying Tommy Robinson is, a Nazi or whatever. And they tell you, you don't work with Nazis, do you? You're going to be like, look, man, I don't know anything about this. I don't know who this guy is. I do not need this contract. And then you cancel. Why? Like when the activists reach out to Chase Bank and claim certain conservatives are, Nazis or whatever, Chase is not going to spend, resources to try and actually figure out if this guy legitimately is a bad person. They're going to say, you know what? It's one person. We're better off just getting rid of him unless we get bad press. So just shut their account down. And there you go. It's that easy. Yeah. Eventually, we might come to a tipping point where it collapses. MasterCard and Chase can only remove so many people before the press is bad enough, because you can't, banning people's financial access is terrifying. But you know what, man? Facebook is policing opinion. They're stealing your data. They've been stealing your data for years. Even if you've never signed up for Facebook, you have a profile. It's called a shadow profile, and they collect it from other people to build a profile on you. And what has anyone done about it? Nobody cares. We are downward spiral, man.
But that's where the left and the right agree. I know a lot of people, that progressives that I talk to all the time, that we don't agree politically, but both agree.
No, they don't.
Let's stop using Facebook Messenger and start using.
No, that's absolutely not true. You look at conservatives, and they tend to actively campaign against big tech monopolies as well as censorship. You look at the progressives, and when you talk about censorship, they say it's a private platform. But then when it comes to them being surveilled, they say, oh no, heavens, we can't allow this. It's complete hypocrisy. I don't think they actually care. They just want to win for their tribe. I'm not saying it's most conservatives either, but in terms of the people fighting for free speech, it's so ridiculous. There's Alabama Public Television refused to air Arthur because there's a gay wedding in it. Yeah. And I see all these progressives saying, now the free speech people aren't protesting anymore, are they? And then you see all the replies where they're like, because they only care about hate speech, they're liars. And I'm like, do you follow any of the free speech people? Of course we're talking about this. It's a top Reddit post. Alabama Public Access not showing Arthur is more terrifying. But they don't actually follow anybody. They don't actually pay attention. They look at like a screenshot of my video and then claim and then make up an argument for me. I think we're screwed. In my experience,
you tweeted out an agreement with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she said like facial recognition surveillance could be a form of social control. And she goes, I don't want to see an authoritarian surveillance state that's run by either the government or 5 companies.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. Except the people that she's aligned with are overt anti-Semites who have been outed by the New York Times and Tablet Magazine. So I don't trust her as far as, she says anything. And the people who align with her are the ones who repeatedly say, but I'm a private platform. So I view her as an overt hypocrite who doesn't understand math and thinks a $21 trillion accounting error can pay for healthcare. So it's great, if she when she comes out and says we shouldn't have this, bravo. You'll get a hand clap from me, and I'll say, great, let's get started. There's a lot of people who are going to rag on her for that and say, I saw a lot of tweets where they're like, oh, please, you're the censorship private platform people. Why should we? Look, that argument is for when people defend private platforms. If she's going to come out and say we got to stop the big tech monopolies, I'll say, great, I'm on board. I'm on board straight up. I'm not in this for tribalism. I don't like AOC. I don't like Trump either. But if Trump does something that's good, then I'll say, okay, great, right? Give me a solution. If AOC does something, you know, I actually agree with more than just that from AOC. Private prisons are a horrible thing that need to be stopped. We can't create a profit motive based on locking people up. And you see these ridiculous pipelines. We had these scandals where judges were taking kickbacks from private juvenile facilities to send kids. You know, we got to fix that problem. So if AOC comes out with a good idea, I'm right behind it. You know, but I'll still rag on her and Trump and you know, whoever else speaking nonsense about nonsense stuff.
Taking an acute pivot and speaking about journalism, how do you see Subverse being straight news? How do you do straight news without analysis or figuring out why things are happening, which in many cases
is that different than gay news,
requires an opinion? Because right now you're saying, I just want to give straight news. And I'm picturing in my head, okay, how can you do that without putting in your opinion? And how is that different from just me seeing a headline going through the bottom of my screen like CNN used to do like 20 years ago?
Well, I mean, the videos are 10 minutes long. We cover a variety of issues on, you know, specific things. Today, we talked about ransomware and the various cities that have been impacted by it. The Subverse videos, when it comes to actual hosted segments with, you know, if we do original reporting about tech issues, it's usually going to be, we talk to the camera because I can't film computer code. So it's rather boring. That's the way I describe it. It's like, you'll turn it on and you're going to hear me say X, Y, and Z happened. This happened, this happened, this happened. You're not going to hear me say, I think this was wrong because of X, and I think we need to X. That's not Subverse. When it comes to on the ground reporting, it's just straight up. Today, we went to, you know, the Venezuelan embassy. Activists were there holding up signs. The police came, and it's very, very dry. So basically, the bulk of the content we're hoping to produce is going to be straight news, but Subverse is going to be entertainment. You know, we're going to have gaming stuff. We're going to have opinion. We're going to have expert opinion. What we're trying to do when it comes to opinion and analysis is focus on academics and experts. So we've interviewed a few different experts on different things like propaganda and gender and sexuality. We leave the opinion to them, not us, right? So I guess one way I could put it is objectivity. You know, these activists try to claim that objectivity doesn't exist because they confuse objectivity with omniscience. You know, if I'm filming something, I can be objective. If I'm talking about something, I can be objective. They think it means you're omniscient and you know everything all the time. That's not how it works. But ultimately, it's just going to be rather, I don't know, middle of the road centrist. The people on the far left think they're the center. The people on the far right think they are the center. They do. I've talked to them. They think they're centrists. I know one guy who's literally been convicted of terrorism who thought he was a centrist. And I'm like, you're nuts. Like, you are as far left as you're a socialist. You're not a centrist. And they're like, no, you don't understand. No, I do understand. You're not in the center. So Subverse will likely just be, if we're on the ground, here's what happened. We're going to do segments where we talk to people. You know, we're taking the van out. We're going to go to college towns. We're going to go to key political states. We're going to interview people. And we're not going to say something like, I think you're wrong for supporting X. We're going to say, one of the big issues right now that's being highlighted by, you know, so-and-so, Bernie Sanders, who's campaigning in Iowa, he says this issue is very important. How do you feel about it? Would you agree with Bernie Sanders? And then, you know, and there we go. And we're going to make these videos where we just kind of talk to people, let them say their piece. You know, we'll give pushback where we need to. If someone says something ridiculous like, well, Obama was a Muslim, we're going to be like, okay, you know. But for the most part, you know, I say the segments we're going to do when we're on the ground are going to be kind of like Change My Mind, like Steven Crowder's thing where we talk to people, but we're not actually, it's just going to be real conversations. That's actually what he was, you know, the segment Crowder did first was called Real Conversations. Yeah. And then eventually turned into Change My Mind. We're just going to do real conversations.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and Bro does something like that. Is it going to take a little bit of that form or something different?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't know. I don't know his videos.
Okay.
Like if we're going to be doing man on the street interviews, it's a very common thing. Yeah. And we're not going to be partisan about it. We're just going to talk to people. Hey, what do you think? Yeah.
So what gave you this burning inside to do this? Because you know, you were at Occupy Wall Street. That seems to be you going back to where it all started. Because for a long time you've been doing Timcast, you've been doing your Tim Pool page, you've been pumping stuff like crazy, like a madman. You've been
I know you upload a lot. I'm like
6 videos per day.
Yeah, it's actually impressive. I'm like, how can you get that all edited and posted?
Is this
Well,
just
it's like
lore,
live shot. So
Okay.
I do
get trapped and read it all. That's a lot of work.
Well, so the stuff on my second channel is just like usually one article or two, and I read and comment on it. It's not super difficult. It does take me all day to do all this content because it's not just that like I grab a random article and I'm like, I'm going to read it and talk to you. No, it's like I find things that are interesting that I want to talk about. Sometimes I actually just read like Twitter threads and like kind of argue. My main channel takes it's a lot harder. I recently switched from edited to live recorded live because it reduces my workload by about an hour, which is very important considering we're trying to expand and I've only got so much time in the day. But as to your question, where did the fire come from? I don't know. And I would say if we did, the government would pay a lot of money to figure out how to ignite a fire of passion within people, to get them working. And that's one of the big challenges. How do we do it? I have no idea.
My assumption was that it was
some
form of civic duty, kind of like, if there was such thing as a heyday of journalism where perhaps some of these big news entities such as NBC, CBS, maybe the Walter Cronkite days, somebody could, say, oh, he was super opinionated, but perhaps I was just assuming maybe it's just going back to a heyday where, the civic duty is to just give the news so that the public is well informed, and then things changed once people realize that there's more money to talking about the Kardashians.
And then when they realized that rage generates traffic, you started to see this ideological shift among news organizations where they started to rationalize and justify not being journalists anymore, where they would start saying things like there's no such thing as objective journalism. That's something Glenn Greenwald says. He's wrong, and that's typically a sociopathic lie to justify how they make money. Oh, we're not going to report the truth because there's no such thing as objective journalism. That's just
you could put that from like critical theory though in gender studies. You could make that argument there. I mean, I wonder.
That is one of the arguments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Objectivity doesn't exist. It does. Objectivity exists. Like if you guys started fighting right now and someone asked me what happened, I'd be like, I don't know, the dude on the left punched the dude on the right. Well, I don't know either of you better than each other. You're just two guys. That's objectivity. Like I'm talking to these guys, one guy punches the other. Now, if one of you was my brother and then I said, here's what happened. No, that's biased. You've got a stake in protecting one of these people. So objectivity it exists. But then they say things like, oh, but the stories you choose to cover are your bias. And it's like, and that doesn't mean you're lying. So look, to an extent.
The guy that treats brain cancer, not skin cancer, doesn't love skin cancer.
Right, exactly. Right. And he's not biased against brain cancer by only trying to deal with brain cancer. So in terms of, I think everything comes down to ideology. These activists working in media think they have a civic duty. And they think their civic duty is to combat the Nazis. And they believe they're actual Nazis. Why? Because, well, they're just not smart people. They don't do research. They don't fact check. They write fake news. And they do. It is. I mean, I can pull up example after example of all the ridiculous fake news written. Dave Weigel of Washington Post wrote an overtly fake article. It's like he made it up off the top of his head, accusing Kim.com of trying to hack into Gmail to plant fake emails to prove the Seth Rich conspiracy. And I called him. And he was just like, well, I was in a rush and needed a story or something like that.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, you just made this whole thing up. 6 months later, he stealth edits the article to remove the more extreme accusations. And this is all evidenced on a website called News Diffs, which tracks the stealth edits of various news companies. So that's an example of someone who's a sociopath with no civic duty, who just wants to lie to get clicks or something. But maybe he's actually motivated by what he views as a civic duty to protect our country against the Nazis. So he's willing to lie to do it. Who's right? Well, there are people who believe he should lie. It seems like the regressive left is all in favor of lying if it advances their goals. That's why they simultaneously say Wimixon and women are both offensive. They don't actually think either of them are offensive. They just want the power. And so they found a way to make it, no matter what you do, you're offensive and we can control you.
Yeah. So a fib in the service of the truth is a moral good.
They believe the ends justify the means. I don't. And so if you're somebody who believes the ends justify the means, you'll agree with them. And you'll say, but what about the fascists? It's okay. It's okay when we do it. There's a really funny tweet from this brewery. They said, don't throw milkshakes or something, throw bricks. And then when someone emailed them saying, you're asking for trouble, they went, oh, we're being threatened. Oh, we're being threatened. It's like, you literally just tweeted to throw bricks at people and then got mad that someone said you're asking for trouble. You literally were asking for trouble. That's their mentality. They're allowed to do it because they're morally just and superior to you.
So where do all these passions fall into the connection to Minds? You want to do more events across the country. You want to, see multiple events happen. Right now, you've partnered with us, and by the way, thank you, Tim, for trusting in our work as well, partnering with us. I'm super excited for this event.
Yeah, me too.
where do you see your passions and your work lining up with Minds?
Well, the
Minds,
space,
I should say.
Subverse we're going to be working directly. I don't know how much I should say in terms of who's going to be joining the Subverse team, because it's not necessarily definitive yet. But we're going to be in the same space where Minds is based in Connecticut. We're going to be doing our thing, but it's an amazing space. I've known Bill, the CEO of Minds, co-founder and CEO of Minds, for a while, and they're a small team. I don't believe that anyone is inherently free from temptation or evil. What I do know is Facebook is above and beyond, evil. They've gone way overboard. Google has lost their path. Google's not the worst of the worst. I think Google does a better job than people give them credit for, especially in terms of censorship. But Minds is a smaller platform, which means they have a lot to lose, which means if you're a user, you can hold them to account. And that's a good thing. Market competition is good, and we need to be active on other spaces. I think Minds is one of the only real viable social media platforms that's not one of the big tech, oligarchy companies. There are a lot of companies that are trying to pop up, but they really approach it like enemies. Minds doesn't do that. Minds is just, like, hey, everybody's welcome. They've got people from the left, from the far left, from the right, even the far right, and they try to maintain things. So when it comes to
a social media bill of rights on their platform as well. So it gives you, although there isn't an internet bill of rights that's a nationwide law, that's their own law as a company, which is that's heartwarming.
A lot of activists don't like it, but ultimately, I think one of the biggest problems I have, like one of the biggest threats I see, is these big tech monopolies. So I'm definitely willing to work with and try and figure out how to get some alternatives up and running. And I think Minds is versatile. It's a great platform. They have some services that don't exist. The Minds group function for the Subverse newsroom doesn't exist on any other. It's like a unique thing. So you look at Facebook groups, they suck. They don't really work. I've been in a couple of groups, and it's just a nightmare trying to. I just ignore them. I don't even use them anymore. Twitter doesn't really have groups. They have like DM lists or whatever, but the Minds group function is like, it's amazing. And you can upload videos. They definitely have rules, but they're not as crazy as Twitter. And, just ultimately, even if the people who ran Minds were like crazy fringe activists, they're smaller, which means, you really can talk to them, contact them, and they're not evil and massive and unaccountable like Facebook is. And I think if we're one of the things we have to do to combat these big tech giants that are monopolistic, that are exerting social control, that have foreign interests, we've got to actively engage with alternatives. So Minds, I use BitChute too for archiving my YouTube content. BitChute's great, but Minds to me is like, it's a real viable platform to be on. So I'm definitely going to try and push
another
that.
thing that you can do on Minds that maybe you didn't know, or maybe you did, that you can ask questions to the panelists at the New Jersey IRL Mines event. What we're doing is, if you've been to MythCons in the past and there was a Q&A, there was a small stampede lining up for the microphone. It's a miracle nobody got hurt. So this time, what we're doing, you have to have a Minds account to ask questions to the panelists, or I guess you could ask a question of the moderator, and you're going to submit it there, and that's how we're going to take Q&A. So special feature for Minds.com.
It's also kind of crazy that we've had this technology like messengers, and we still rely on everyone running up full speed and stampeding the microphone.
I know.
Like, it's kind of weird, because we always
to watch, I guess, until someone gets hurt.
I guess. But then you get people standing up and waiting in line, and then they run out of time, and then don't get to your question, and it's like you were standing the whole time. The other thing too is you get people who go up there and start telling their life story. It's like, if you're at the event and you're signed up and we have you as like an attendee, you could just submit your question and we can go through them much more quickly. I mean, I will say it does kind of suck too, because if the question isn't understood properly, you might not get the answer you want. But pros and cons of technology. You know, I think we got to use it
more, and but that is the way we're doing it. It also encourages people to try out the platform, which is
I'd say use it because Facebook, Twitter, and yes, YouTube to a lesser extent, but yes, absolutely YouTube. You've got to break the chain of these massive companies and their insane overreach. And one of the ways to do that is to just use other platforms. I barely even use Facebook anymore. I use it mostly just for Messenger.
Yeah.
And I use Minds for, you know, way more, especially the group function.
What's your vision for the conferences, though? What do you want to do? Why'd you jump into this? You saw our event, you liked it.
You know, with Minds IRL in Jersey, there are going to be progressives there. You know, actually getting some progressives on to sit down and have these conversations is it's a healing process almost, you know, because right now it's just people pointing the finger at each other and shrieking, and you know, we're getting ready for war. So real world events are going to be one of the ways to solve the problem of the division. Like actually, you know, when two people of different factions are standing next to each other, it's really hard for them to be angry. Unless, of course, they have their armies behind them, like at big Trump rallies with Antifa. But if you took an anti-fascist, and maybe anti-fascist is a bad example, but if you took someone who was like a social justice-minded intersectional feminist and put him next to an anti-feminist and had him drink a beer at a bar, they'd probably come to a general understanding. It's, you know, it is contentious, but I think this is what has to be done. And,
yeah,
you know,
we definitely aligned. We've done this with MythCon, you know, in the past. That's obviously why we've partnered. I thought looking for, you know, just a little bit more of your side, but I definitely can't disagree.
Well, no, but I was saying when you talk to somebody that actually is searching more for the truth than they are the adversarial process, like, and you're talking to somebody you disagree with, you often, those are the best conversations, and you can really understand the other point. And almost always, there is that kernel of truth, and maybe you think the balance is different, but you can really understand and empathize with the argument, and you will see people of all stripes there. But the people that go to these events generally are the ones that are in search of the truth, although will have varying viewpoints across the board. So it's worth coming if you haven't been to one of these kind of events before. They're really fun. So,
yeah.
Yeah, so that was to the audience, not so much to you, Tim. But
no, I know. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I'll say here, the Minds IRL event will be Saturday, August 31st. It'll run from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's at the Broadway Theater of Pittman in Pittman, New Jersey. So there you go.
Check it out. Google Minds IRL. You can check out the entire lineup. There's going to be a ton of people there. You can get to talk to everyone. So if you want to chat with Tim Pool, you can, and all the other attendees. You'll meet a lot of people. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Pittman is it's basically in the Philadelphia area. It's like 15-20 minutes from downtown Philly. So it's one of the south suburbs.
So even though it's in New Jersey, right? Think Philly.
It's so weird how so many of our cities are like across the river is a completely different city, but it's the same metro. You know?
Yeah.
We
do that. Our thing in this country.
So where can people support you? Outside of Minds, outside of BitChute, where else can people support your work to make sure that you continue to grow and get that van going?
Oh man, the electrical is all hooked up. It's beautiful. I'm really excited. Solar's there. We got the power outlets and stuff. But I don't know, just youtube.com/Timcast and youtube.com/TimcastNews or Subverse on YouTube. Just subscribe, watch videos, whatever you want to do. Or if you hate me, just don't, and thumbs down my videos. You can do that too. That was always allowed.
Sweet.
I keep picturing Pit My Ride for this thing.
I keep picturing the Mystery Machine.
All right. Well,
I have no idea what Fritz is staring. I think there's a bee that's going around, and he's petrified. He's a big man, but
here's the problem. I'm getting signals over here from our producer. I don't want to obviously take up more of your time. We're at our hour limit here, so I'm kind of in the middle here. Oh yes. The important part is to stay on with us after we close out, so that we can.
He's worried about
some of the back channel conversations.
So we just wanted to hang on just for a second. Thanks everybody. We really appreciate it. Thanks again, Miles, for the super chat. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks again, Tim.